Hi, I'm Andrew Boateng. I am a football scout for Crystal Palace. I'm also a community coach, so I coach a local team in Tottenham, Parkview Rangers. I work for needmorefootball.com as a program director there, and I also support Kickoff at 3, which is what led me to the incident that I'm about to talk about. So back in June, in the height of lockdown, this was the first lockdown that we went through when there was complete paranoia around, etc. Um, Kickoff at 3, as they do, we're still doing community projects and helping to support loads of different causes. One of the charitable causes was, I think it was for St Albans homeless charity at the time. I think so. They planned to organise a charity bike ride because, as you can recall, Boris was saying that people were allowed out for their one piece of exercise a day. And so I decided that I would pick up the Kickoff at 3 bike ride challenge, try and raise some money for charity at the same time as supporting sort of, local community and also getting the health benefits for the family. So I went on a bike ride with my son. Normally we did the whole family, but for this particular day, I'm not sure why, but it was just myself and my son Hugo, who's 13 years old. So we headed off towards the local canal, so along the Lee River, on a charity bike ride. So we thought, and we got to the Lee River area probably about 10 minutes after we left the house. You need to go for a big park, which is where I normally coach the local kids for my grassroots team. Got to the park and there was a police cordon there, and we were a bit curious just to think maybe, hopefully, it's not anyone in our team that we know. So we kind of went nearby to our bikes underneath a tree about 50 meters away, so not to interfere with any investigations, etc. So we had a look from there. We couldn't see anything sort of that would make us think that there was someone in our team involved. So we continued onto the canal. We were riding for a few minutes, and then was slightly behind my son, and my son kind of stopped to see where I was on his bike, and then he went to pedal off again. And as soon as he did that, somebody just jumped out of nowhere, shouting and screaming and raving at him. Well, they had grabbed him to stop him from moving. He thought that he was being attacked at the time because, as I said before, it was the first lockdown, and nobody knew anything about Corona and how bad it was, etc. So he thought it was a crazy person trying to spread coronavirus or something. And so my son logically went into sort of fight or flight mode and sort of pulled himself away from this person. He was shouting at the time. And obviously there's a canal on one side, and then on the other side was a bush. So he went into the bush rather than the canal. We've heard recently that somebody's jumped into the canal along that same, stretch and not survived. Yeah. So my son went into the bushes, ended up being rose bushes. I was shouting at that time, stop, don't go in there, stop. And I was shouting to the person, that's my son, he's 13, leave him alone. And the person then sort of pulled out a taser and sort of trained it at my son towards the bushes and pursued him into the bushes. Just as I was about to go towards them, this all happened in a split second, as you can imagine. And someone else jumped out from nowhere and started shouting and raving at me. And I turned around and I could see they were in plain clothes, so I could tell who they were. But it turns out they were police officers in plain clothes. So this kind of started to register with me, and that this other officer pulled out a taser and trained that on myself and told me to get on my knees, hands on knees, and put my hands behind my head. I was then subsequently handcuffed without any questioning, etc. They were still ranting and shouting. Meanwhile, I was still preoccupied with what was going on in the bush with my son. My son had gone in there. He'd come out, which felt like a bit of an eternity because I didn't know what was happening in there. And obviously I'd seen the guy go in after him with the taser drawn, so I didn't know if he discharged it or anything. Luckily, my son came out, emerged from the bushes with this man after, probably about a minute or so. And but he had cuts and scrapes and bruises all down his face. His face was bleeding. everything. So I didn't know exactly what had happened in there. Obviously, it turned afterwards that he'd tripped inside the bush and fell into the actual thorny rose bushes after he's being pursued by the person, and the person told afterwards was standing over him with a taser, threatening to discharge the taser at him. And this is a 13-year-old child who's just literally gone on a father and son charity bike ride, never been in trouble with the police, never, even come in contact with the police apart from sort of kick off at free tournaments and things. So yeah, it was all a big total shock to him. So other person then led my son away to somewhere where I couldn't be around a corner, handcuffed him as well, and he's only 13. So he was in handcuffs, I was in handcuffs, I was on the floor still. I was trying to explain to the officer who was standing over me that we're on a charity bike ride and that I've got an app on my phone that I could show him, etc. So trying to explain all this. I couldn't get to my phone, obviously, because I had the handcuffs on. And I was thinking to myself, really, this should be recorded because, I'd recently been on a visit to a pupil referral unit with some people that were doing a talk, these two ex-offenders that were doing a talk in a pupil referral unit. And we went alongside an organization called Why Stop, which is affiliated to an organization called Release. And they were explaining to, youngsters about their rights and what to do in a stop and search situation. So I took a lot of that on board, etc. And so I was trying to, get a recording going, but I couldn't. My hands are in handcuffs, my hands are behind my back. So I did at that point shout out and somebody record this. And then luckily, it's a very nice young lady who lives on the barge, one of the barges alongside the canal, Louise Payton, who came out from there. She's actually a photographer in her day job, and she videoed the incident from then on. And I did ask the police, so why have you stopped us? What's going on? And they said there'd been a stabbing in the area, and myself and my son fitted the description, as they do say. So I then asked what was the description, and they said, well, it was a black person on a bike, a young IC3, as they say in police talk. So I did then proceed to say, look, we do live in Tottenham. This is Tottenham, which is predominantly, you're going to get a lot of IC3s on bikes in the area riding along the canal. So you could potentially just be stopping anyone, the first person you see. And then later on, one of the other officers did confirm that that's exactly what they would have done. The first person that they seen, they would have stopped that fitted the description, as in the IC3, which is really not the way to go about it, because if you're stopping someone, you need to kind of ascertain a proper description: eye color, hair color, build, all these things that you would normally sort of ascertain before you actually go into a situation with that amount of force and aggression. So I then proceeded to have a long discussion with the officers, still in handcuffs, I might add. So probably about 10 minutes I was discussing with them why they'd done it, what was going on, what are you doing, questioning my son for, and we've got a lot of sort of condescending sort of, rhetoric back and attitude back, etc. And like I said, I was still in handcuffs most of the time, even though they could clearly tell that I was not a threat, that we had nothing to do with the situation. So then proceeded still to be looking in the bushes, etc., for like a weapon, etc. And they didn't obviously find anything because we had nothing to do with it. We were just on a charity bike ride. But what they did retrieve from the bushes was my son's face mask, which they knocked off, and that's about it. So that was the situation, which was quite shocking, as you can imagine. And my son was obviously in shock for days afterwards, weeks possibly. I was in shock, and then obviously the paperwork and everything that comes with it, all the follow-up sort of interviews, because it was quite widely documented after that. So it was quite a grueling time, and it was the height of lockdown, as you can imagine, and everyone was still trying to deal with coronavirus, working from home, the whole lot. And that was when everyone was working from home. Schools were not open. So it was quite intense, let's just say. And it was a case of trying to get through that period. I mean, the superintendent for the area did call was it the next day? Or was it the same evening? I'm not sure, but somebody came around on the same evening, I think, from the local sort of police community engagement team, which was good. And they did sort of apologize and try to appease the situation. They did explain that, you know, I think the person did say that they were quite sort of miffed at the fact that they've been trying to build a lot of, you know, rapport in the community, and then, you know, another group, because I think it was a TSG group, so like a territorial support group, a different area, that had come down and responded to this sort of potentially knife crime incident in the park. So they kind of tried to explain that part. The superintendent did call me, which is good, and she has been regular contact since. So I can't fault that, the sort of after follow up, which was you know, good. So now what we're trying to do is get some sort of positive solutions out of it, because I do a lot of work with Kickoff at Free, and I've been around sort of the you know, police environment, etc. I even used to play football with the Metropolitan Police at one point a long time ago. So I do know there are good officers, and you know, it's only a small sort of minority that sort of tarnish the whole sort of reputation for the rest of the force. So continue to sort of work with them to try and build better bridges, and to try and make sure that things are better for the youths, and they're not actually accosted in this manner on a frequent basis, which we're seeing far too frequently. And there's been some other high profile incidences, such as the Bianca Williams case, etc. And even Dawn Butler, the MP. There's been loads of sort of stop and searches, and we're always hearing the same thing. Oh, they either smell drugs, or, you know, you fit the description. So you know, that one's getting a little bit old, but they still manage to sort of get away with it, and it still keeps happening. So we're trying to build positive solutions and bridges. So I've been speaking to the local police, and been sort of invited onto like a independent advisory board to sort of feedback, and we're trying to get some positive things happening in the area. Trying to do a lot of work with the Broadwater Farm estate as well. And one of the proposals is to have sort of a mini football tournament there, and then sort of branch it out into different things. So it might turn into sort of like the music and creative arts and things like that as well. But again, it's just an early discussion phase. I know also recently that the mayor's office has released sort of a strategic plan to get things like you know, loads more training for the police, unconscious bias training, etc. And ironically, I have been working with, I had a meeting earlier actually with Michael Dewberry, who's an ex-footballer for Chelsea and Leeds, and played up in Scotland in St Johnstone, but now he does a leadership program. So he's got his own company called Made Leaders, and they go into organizations and talk to them about management and leadership skills and things like that. But they also do sort of diversity training and unconscious bias training, etc. So it might be an idea to try and feed that in somehow, alongside the Safe Zones project, which is being rolled out across, well, it's been rolled out in Croydon and Ipswich at the moment. That will kind of have training for police officers, and also get people within the community to be sort of people that can be trusted, and young people can go to them and speak to them about issues within the community. There'll be sort of first training for them as well, etc. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do as a solution to the problem. What we're really asking for is sort of any sort of local businesses and sort of maybe national businesses, etc., to get behind the cause, to support, to try and fund some of the programs, or part fund them alongside the police. Also, maybe to get some more youngsters involved in some of the initiatives, etc. For example, I think the police are trying to roll out a recruitment program for young cadets, for example, because you know, there's not enough sort of diversity there within the police force. So that could be one way to to get them involved, or even just any group of people really to get involved in the young cadets. And so there's that. And these are some of the things that really help to kind of push initiatives that we're doing really.